hearts are on fire tonight, sharing their defiant larrikin souls. A larrikin song our kids may never sing in the silent world we're building for them. A quiet world full of debt and shame that we are leaving to them. A silent world where the larrikins were the choirs of yesterday. Why are we putting up with all of this? Don't we want all of our kids to know that they are all Australians and that this land is their home? Why are we putting up with all of this? Don't we want all of our kids to know that they are all Australians and that this land is their home?
Okay, here we go. Let's get going. Like this morning, it looks like we don't have a visual of Geert, so we just have him. Are you there, Doctor?
Well, now I should be able to join with my iPhone. Just a second. So I'm now entering the studio. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you.
Yeah.
There you are.
I'll just close down my computer.
Oops.
Okay. Okay.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thanks
How's
for
the war?
inviting me to your podcast.
How's the
Okay.
war against humanity going in Belgium?
Oh, well, you know, I mean, the situation is like, I guess, everywhere. It's chaos everywhere. I mean, this world is getting increasingly crazy. So it's becoming very difficult to find people who still have some common sense. Yeah. But I guess I'm in good company. So not worrying too much for the time being.
Before we get in, I was looking that you started off as a veterinarian. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, my my education, my academic background is veterinary medicine, but early on in my career, I shifted completely to human infectious diseases, and you know, after having done some clinical work, actually as an equine practitioner, an equine surgeon, it's some kind of like very remarkable coincidence, but it changed my career from one day on the other, from veterinary, equine medicine and surgery to molecular biology, immunology, virology, all on human infectious diseases, in fact. So ever since then, well, that's now almost for like 30 years, I've been concentrating on human immunology, vaccinology, and infectious diseases. Yeah, working with all these vaccine companies. I mean, human vaccines. I never worked with a veterinary vaccine company. So yeah. But you know, as you know, humans are just another type of mammals, right? So don't worry too much.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I remember,
but that's correct.
I remember seeing horses being anesthetized. I was an anesthesiologist, and that's no joke. You know, the size of the tubes that they put down, and the way you have to standing up and then tilting on the side, and it's
Yeah, human veterinary medicine is quite underestimated, and I've been ridiculed a number of times because I was engaging in, you know, like Yeah, this COVID crisis, human infectious disease, and a veterinarian who's engaging into this. Whereas, I mean, we have probably got more epidemiology than all the doctors and human global health or global health experts together, right? I mean, epidemiology is a very, very important thing in veterinary medicine, because you are talking about herds, of cattle, of poultry, flocks of poultry, pigs. So with a huge economical impact, right? So we are actually very strong in epidemiology, whereas the doctors in human medicine, I mean, they don't get to see that much immunology, not that much epidemiology, but it's, of course, it was an easy argument to ridicule me, because why would I bother, and how do I dare even to bother about a human infectious diseases being a veterinarian, so to say. But I can live with this.
Gert, I remember having the veterinary anaesthetist from Sydney University come to talk with us at the hospital, and I thought it was fascinating. And in our discussions at the time, I remember he just made an offhanded comment about how when they used the lignocaine spray topically on the cords, cats went into pulmonary edema. They had a very bad reaction to the local anesthetic spray. This was the same spray that we were using in humans, and we were noticing they were starting to get a lot of sore throats, and we were spraying their throats so they'd have less pain, not more pain. And we realized that the label on the AstraZeneca bottle had changed from blue to white, and then upped the amount of alcohol in the dose. I realized that actually this comparative biology, you can learn things that you can be cued to things that you just wouldn't realize without looking at the different species difference. I think this helps me understand why you're so tuned into population level.
Of course.
Because the human, the traditional focus is on the individual in medicine, and so we're not as trained to think in terms of population level and herd.
Yeah. Even our global health authorities, they are very much focused on this individual cases, how many hospitalizations, what will be the burden for medical staff, etc. And they are not looking at population level in the longer term, for example. So that is something we got very well trained in, because obviously when you talk about pigs, poultry, cattle, it's not about the individual animal, right? It's about the herd. It's about the and that is why epidemiology at the population level, it is something that I would say typically people who got trained in veterinary medicine are pretty strong at, right? I mean, it makes a lot of sense to us to look at the population level. And at the end of the day, if there is an impact at the level of the population, it will of course have an impact on every single individual, right? But the other way around is not correct. Treating somebody in a kind of personalized way is not necessarily going to have a beneficial impact on the herd, right? So but I mean, this is the kind of let's say misunderstandings, but of course it is prejudices that exist towards people who express their opinion on human infectious diseases while having a veterinary academic background. But as I said, I mean, I just was in this clinical clinical duty, so for about 5 or 6 years, and then I switched completely. But I'm very glad I studied veterinary medicine. I'm always saying, if I would have to begin my life, start over my life, I would probably change many, many things, but I would always still study veterinary medicine.
Isn't the head of Pfizer a vet?
Yeah. But he got his degree from a university in Greece. Not that I'm saying okay, this was bad education, but obviously the level was not back in those days. Comparable to what it was in our countries, I would say, and even in Australia. I mean, even also Australia has very good veterinary schools. Same for the US. Same for a number of countries in Europe. But yeah, I don't know that much about Greece. But everybody can become corrupt regardless of your education. If you get corrupt, I mean, the education doesn't matter anymore because you cannot honestly apply this. It doesn't lead to your corrupt goal, right? So yeah. Anyway,
Can I ask you a question just before Paul kicks in? We've been doing these shows now for 4.5, 5 years. One thing that's happening now a lot is people say there's no such thing as viruses. They don't exist. What are your thoughts on that?
well, I would say if you are dealing with this type of people, I can send you a very nice manuscript that is literally dealing with every single of their arguments. Because we virologists, etc., we are so fed up with this stupidity that I think back 2, 3 years ago, some people started to really, write a paper and a rebuttal to these stupid arguments. And if you would, I'm happy. I sent it already to thousands of people, right?
Oh, send it
Because
through. Send it
because so
through.
many people are confronted with these questions, and I mean, it seems a little bit weird that people like me and many others would have been dedicating at least 20 years of our life to virology alone. I mean, are we really that stupid? Obviously, we are not. But then, when it comes to literally, formulating the right arguments to make these people who are extremely biased, of course, to even make them run out of arguments, it's not that easy, of course. And that's exactly what that paper does. And so I'm very happy, to send you that
Yeah,
the
please.
link to that paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Of
hard.
course, if there's no viruses, then there's no bioweapons programs.
Yeah. I mean, it is so
It's very,
simple to
it's very
even.
convenient. It's very convenient because if there's no viruses, then there's no such thing as bioweapons.
Yeah. It comes to the same. It comes down to the same thing, Paul. And I would say, I mean, you as a person, you don't exist. It's not because I see you, because that's just an image. That is just an impression, on my retina, and that is not necessarily a reality. That is the point. They completely ignore electron micrographs and everything. They completely ignore this, and also they come with a Koch postulate. And exactly in that paper that I'm happy to send you, this exactly is dealt with in detail. Why this is not a rejection of the Koch postulate, etc. But these people go, yeah, so far as to even ignore things that are almost like tangible, like the most sophisticated electron micrographs, cryomicroscopy, and everything. So and then they combine this with the Koch postulate, and yeah, and that question comes back over and over again. But as I was saying, these guys, these two scientists, I think a virologist and an immunologist, they dealt quite in detail with this, like stupid comment, and it makes our life a little bit easier because whenever that comment comes on social media, etc., you simply send a link, which is publicly available to everybody who wants to read it, right? Yeah.
Michael, they call it viruses obligate intracellular organisms. And that's the thing. So they have to, unlike bacteria, which is when Koch was talking, he was talking about standalone walled bacteria. Viruses have to live in something. They have to grow in something. And then the issue is you have to then separate that from the thing it's living in. So
Exactly.
that's why it gets messy. it gets messy, but it doesn't mean it's a misunderstanding of postulates.
Yeah. Well, obviously, all of these people who come up with this argument, well, none of them actually have a background in biology or even something similar. So these are always the most difficult questions, because these people literally put everything in question. They would go as far as I was saying, as ignoring your existence, Paul. Right?
Yes.
That is, yeah, it's as simple as that. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? I've been following AI, and there's a lot of people saying now that AI is already conscious, but it's not a conscious like our consciousness. Do viruses have some communal conscious in order
No.
to? No, they don't.
No. So the
Really?
only thing that viruses can do, it's pretty basic. They can replicate, obviously, and they can mutate. And some viruses, but that is not relevant for the viruses we are regularly talking about, like flu, like coronavirus, and even a number of these childhood viral diseases. But some viruses, like HIV, hepatitis C, like Epstein-Barr virus, they can also hide in the genes, in your genome. But that is not relevant for the viruses we are talking about, like corona, flu, etc. They can basically only replicate, and they can mutate. That's all what they can do. And so the problem is that what is completely ignored, that is by big frustration all along, even by public health experts and even by virologists, is the immune system, right? Because they say the virus is behaving like this and this and this. And the virus doesn't want to die, and therefore it is implementing this and this strategy. Come on, to have a strategy, you have to have brains, right? So no, the behavior of a virus in a living organism, and as Paul was pointing out, it needs to rely on a living organism, otherwise it cannot replicate. The viral behaviors in an organism that has an immune system, like even most primitive animals have, is largely shaped by the immune response to the virus, right? So, for example, if you develop at the population level, we are interested to look at this at the population level. If at the population level, you are going to develop a herd immunity, for example, you're going to control the virus, right? And so what virologists say, for example, who many of them, believe it or not, have no clue really of immunology, they're saying, okay, the virus is calming down, it's adapting to the population, and it won't kill the population because otherwise it wouldn't have an opportunity to continue to replicate. That is not the primary driver. The primary driver is the population that develops collectively a sterilizing immunity, and that is going to prevent the transmission of the virus. So the virus is no longer transmitting. So there is no longer cases, for example. And that is not due to the attenuation of the virus, because we know very well the very last variants that you will isolate, for example, at the end of an epidemic or at the end of a pandemic, is still exactly the same virus, exactly the same virus lineage as at the beginning of the pandemic. So there is no attenuation there in a normal, natural epidemic or pandemic. It's the immune system that controls the virus and that gives people the false impression that the virus is changing by strategy, by intelligence, to your point, its behavior. That is, it's always an interaction between two parties are fighting. The virus is trying to subvert the immune system, and the immune system is, of course, fighting back. It's mounting antibodies, it's mounting cellular immunity, etc., etc. And they keep each other more or less in balance, right? But then, of course, at the end of a normal pandemic or epidemic, the immunity of the population wins, so the virus is under control, till that immunity wanes, for example, right? And then you get a new epidemic of flu, for example, in the next year. So that is this interaction. People need to understand that virus behavior the behavior of a virus in a living organism that has an immune system is in fact the outcome, is defined by the outcome between the interaction between the immune system, the immune defense, and the virus who is attacking, of course, the host, because it needs the cells of the host to replicate, right? So, yeah, so there's no intelligence involved there, if you
Yeah, I
like.
get it. It's more, yeah.
But
There's
it is complex. It is complex, the interaction, especially once you fact.
Yeah.
See, I think they tend to limit the. Uh, I sat in on the ASAP meetings where they were looking at improving COVID for younger and younger populations, and they would talk about, they were constantly focusing on the antibodies, the antibody titers,
Yeah.
and often someone came up and said, we don't. The antibody titers we don't have good correlates with protection from antibody levels, but they seem to be focused so narrowly on a particular antibody level, not realizing that actually protection is much more complex, and like you say, involves the interaction of the virus as it's changing. It's not static, with a complex with an individual organism and their host defenses, and that the immune system is complex too. So I think that's where people have trouble grokking.
The problem that you always see when you are dealing with complex systems is, people have experienced the need to simplify things in order to be able to understand them. And if you start simplifying these things, you rapidly come up with a black or white judgment. This is typically the polarization we are seeing. There is no gray zone anymore. Look on social media. Whatever topic you're dealing with, it's black or it is white.
Yes,
and even
100%.
very often dealing with very complex systems, not only with pandemic, also climate change, even geopolitical situations, very, very complex. It's black or it is white on social media, because people have experienced the need to simplify things. And if you do this with complex things where interactions are very complicated, etc., then of course you make major mistakes. And it's also the reason why nowadays it has become impossible to have an open, honest debate, even among scientists, about all these things, because people are so polarized, right? It's black or white. I'm never saying it's black or white. I have this gray zone, but with this gray zone, I'm now, with regard to the pandemic, for example, I'm becoming in a very isolated position, because all the people who are completely, whatever the situation, who are completely against any vaccine or any immunization practice that you could possibly imagine, they start to hate me, because I'm saying sometimes immune interventions can be useful, for example. And then those, of course, who would give children already at birth 72 injections, I'm saying this is crazy. Please, hold it with this. This is a complete nonsense. They are hating me too, because I'm no longer playing the game of, as a trained vaccinologist. You see, so if you are serious about the science, you inevitably nowadays find yourself in a very isolated position, right? I don't care. My best friend, except for my girlfriend, is the science, right? I mean, I don't care that much about this, but some people seem to be, they want to prove it is black, or they want to prove it is white, and it's impossible, because that's not reality. That's not the reality. So
complex systems are not easily they're not predictable. They can have emergent properties, and they can act non-linearly. And people tend to, a lot of people, what the shortcut, is very linear thinking.
Exactly.
And they don't have the ability, it seems, a lot to deal with complex systems.
Yeah, I'm very glad you raised this point, Paul, because it has been the topic of my most recent Substacks. And I must say, I have no problem with this. I have to admit that I made this mistake myself at the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of the mass vaccination campaign, that I thought things would evolve in a linear way. So, for example, when I started seeing the tremendous immune escape of the virus that was escaping the collective immune response of the population, I thought in a linear way, if this is going to continue, we are going to have, in no time, a virus that is so infectious that the immune system has absolutely no chance. That was my linear thinking. And that was also why my predictions that this would end in a catastrophic way very, very soon. So I made my timelines, which were all wrong, till I began to understand that it is not linear. And that is, to your point, exactly because of the interaction between, for example, virus and immune system that can mutually adapt. They can mutually adapt to each other to improve their defense. So what I found was all of a sudden the immune system was no longer mounting antibodies against these highly variable epitopes of spike, but it started to build antibodies against much more conserved epitopes in spike. So because it was much more conserved, it was much more protective against variants. But on the other hand, that immunity didn't last that long, right? So there you got a complete deviation of the linear evolution that was, so to say, at the advantage of the virus. The immune system crawled back and did a better job, but still not good enough to control the virus. So that immune escape was still possible, but it was progressing at a much slower pace, what we are still seeing today, because people even think now that the pandemic is completely under control, it's calm, the acute cases, or there are fewer acute cases, hospitalizations have diminished, transmission has diminished, viral load has diminished, etc. But the virus is still evolving. There is still mutants generated. It is still spreading. There are still vaccine breakthrough infections. Yes, there are still cases, not that much acute cases, but more and more chronic cases, long COVID, etc. So that is entirely to your point. At some point, this complexity doesn't follow a linear formula anymore, and the mechanism can change by mutual adaptation one to another, so that all of a sudden get a complete deviation from that linear curve, and it becomes quite unpredictable, as you were pointing out correctly. If you have a scenery and you say, I understand it, and the evolution will be simply linear, then you can easily predict. If there is deviation from that linearity, you're lost, right? So I had to find it out the hard way myself. But I'm not like a politician. I say this, and if it doesn't come out like this, a politician says, "Yeah, you misunderstood what I was saying." In fact, that's what I meant, and he will anyway try whatever he can to make people believe that in fact it was their misunderstanding. I'm not
Yeah,
like this. I'm a scientist. I say, my God, I learned a lot. This is just
yeah.
amazing. This is just amazing, right? Yeah. Over.
With
Is that
with
the
Omicron,
immune refocusing? Is that the immune refocusing you've been talking
Yeah,
about?
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is immune refocusing. That is a way for the immune system to adapt to something that becomes very, very critical. Just like, for example, the virus can do this. When we had to change all of a sudden to Omicron, all of a sudden overnight, 32 mutations in the spike protein. That was also not linear. The virus did something very spectacular that was unprecedented, that was unforeseen, that was completely unpredictable. Nobody could predict this. And these are the type of changes that you can afterwards understand why it happened, but you cannot really predict this, right? You cannot really predict this. There is some things you can predict, but it becomes very, very difficult when you have to predict timelines. Here, what you can predict is that as long as the virus is not under control, the likelihood that the virus will win is very, very high, simply because the virus can very rapidly and easily adapt, its life cycle, or 12 hours. Every 12 hours, the virus can generate a new generation of progeny virus, right? I mean, that is not something humans can do, or the adaptability of the immune system in humans is, of course, it's another dimension. It hasn't that kind of flexibility or velocity, I would say. So these things you can predict, that as long as this evolution and this spread, and even if this chronic, will continue, I mean, the virus will win. The one, according to Darwin, the one who ultimately can best adapt to the situation, right? And the virus, as I was saying, it can replicate, it can mutate, it can do all of this very, 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 very fast. So yeah, but the linearity, the non-linearity, is a very, very important thing that you highlighted correctly when it comes to complex interactions. Yeah.
The strange thing about Omicron was, I remember when it was like a Monday, they said it was in Africa that they discovered a new variant, and our ports were closed, our airports were closed, and yet within a week it was in Australia, or less than a week. How did that happen?
Well, how did that happen? I think people, forget about that these are respiratory infections, and I think there was even, I think this professor was an Australian. I think he was an Australian professor who showed the movements of the virus through aerosols, but intercontinental, right? And then you have to realize that all populations, before they encountered Omicron, 32 mutations in spike protein, they were completely, in fact, naive, even having been infected with one other variant before that was very, very different. They were pretty naive, immunologically naive to this virus. So then you get two things. It's always, again, it's a gray zone. It's not just, okay, you don't have sufficient immunity. No, what's also important is the viral load that you get exposed to, right? I mean, if you have no immunity, but you only are dealing with a few particles, well, most likely your immune system, and certainly your innate immune system, can still deal with this. If you have, poor immunity, and then on top you are, you are in the same room as a super spreader, for example, and you're getting a huge viral load on your respiratory airways, then the virus will propagate. It will make you ill, right? So it is all this is, but that virus could move not just from one person to another per aerosol, but even in the upper, I don't know, it's not the stratosphere, it's not my field of expertise, but and could intercontinentally spread. I think it's an Australian professor who 2-3 years ago, maybe already 4 years ago, had clearly demonstrated that this was the reason why it could spread so rapidly. And then, same as what's happening right now, you can have this mutant arising in whatever part of the world. I mean, mutations are everywhere. When the virus replicates, the virus will automatically also mutate. So you have mutations all over the place. But that's not the point. The point is, the question is, how does it come that that particular mutation can all of a sudden spread and become dominant? And that the explanation is, again, the immune system. If the population is mounting an immune response that can be precisely and coincidentally escaped from by this particular mutant. There are many, many mutants, but now all of a sudden you are facing a mutant among many others, but that particular mutant can escape the strong immune response that the population is mounting, then that particular mutant will all of a sudden get a huge competitive advantage compared to all other circulating variants. And then it will very rapidly dominate. So people think, yeah, I mean, Omicron, it emerged in Africa. So you see, it has nothing to do with the mass vaccination, because the mass vaccination was in Australia, Europe, North America, etc. That's not the point. The point is, in which population was the collective immunity such that it could be readily evaded by Omicron? That is the point. So people completely ignore always this immunity, right? This suboptimal immunity that we didn't get, and therefore we didn't get herd immunity. That's the reason why the virus is still spreading.
I remember reading that people who were in the Antarctic bases, and they had very stringent
Exactly.
isolation,
Yeah.
and yet developed COVID. And I think
Exactly. Yeah,
you've given me an explanation now, because I'm thinking how they had such stringent protocols, such good isolation. You don't get any better. They could have. The only better isolation was if they were on the moon, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've read this as well. Yeah, this was a very nice proof of what we are actually saying, that the virus didn't simply spread from one person to another. So yeah, all this is adding to the complexity of what is happening, and this is also the reason why people who are not familiar with these fields, with the many fields that are involved in, I would say, the pathogenesis of an epidemic or a pandemic at the population level, they're focusing only on their field. And because they are just focusing on their field, for example, virology, and they are ignoring immunology, ignoring vaccinology, etc., they come up with black and white statements that are, leading to polarization, and it's miserable. You cannot talk, you cannot discuss with people who have polarized views, and certainly not polarized views because they are simply missing the knowledge in the other disciplines, right? They cannot put the pieces of the puzzle together. That's the problem.
Yeah, you need generalists. We need more generalists, and that's very precious. Mind you, AI is a generalist, so maybe things will get better with AI. I don't know, but I was a little bit suspicious. I have to admit, Gert, that you, because you work for GAVI, and I thought, well, GAVI's an evil organization or whatever I was thinking. But I realized recently you were you've been quite critical of the WHO and GAVI.
Of course. That is the reason why I basically left these organizations. Because again, the same. I recently, I think yesterday or the day before, I've been posting. I can be pretty mean on X, on Twitter, when I talk about these people. But it is so it's even more than frustrating. It is a scandal that in these organizations, the decision makers, I'm not talking about the people who are working there, the employees, who are very often very decent people like you and me, having the heart on the right place, having a lot of knowledge, but the decision makers, they have no clue. Look at Tedros. I mean, what is his background? What does he understand about immunology, about infectious disease, vaccinology, etc.? I mean, and they are taking the decisions with their staff completely incompetent, one, and then having plenty of conflicts of interest. And this leads to catastrophic situations, even for GAVI. GAVI is financing all these efforts, right? I mean, GAVI, so to say, is financing all the initiatives that the WHO is conducting. But, Paul, if I was at the Gates Foundation, before I was funding a project, I wanted to know, based on my knowledge, I had a very critical view. I was asking all the critical questions. I was, stopping grants that were running before I joined the foundation, and I was declining 90% of all proposals, right? Whether they came from a professor that had won the Nobel Prize or I didn't care, based on my knowledge, hands-on knowledge, vaccines, etc. So when you finance, you cannot blindly finance. GAVI is blindly financing without having the competence even to evaluate, to assess whether what WHO is doing, whether it makes sense, what is the risk, the risk assessment, what are the risks, what are the strengths, what are the opportunities, nothing. Just collecting a huge amount of money. I tell you, the amount of money that is currently available in global health, it's just amazing. It's no longer like 20, 30 years ago. It's an amazing amount of money. And they're just financing without asking the critical questions. That is something that, that is also, it was so disgusting for me. And especially after the Ebola crisis, in the West African countries 10 years ago, I left. I could no longer stand this. I mean,
That's what I wanted to ask you.
I was making a decent amount of money. I was making a decent amount of money, all tax-free in Switzerland, right? But, I declined this. I mean, there is limits, right? And that was for me the limit, yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask you. 2015, I think, the Ebola, you were. Was it back in 2015 that you had the falling out?
It was about 10 years ago, and then it was about that time, and then Merck developed a vaccine, a live attenuated vaccine, and WHO, who had never really conducted a clinical trial of I would say of major importance, they all of a sudden decided with the clinician that was conducting that study was completely incompetent, and but WHO wanted to have the reputation. Okay, Ebola crisis. Look what we are doing. WHO steps in, takes the responsibilities, conducting the clinical trial, etc. And basically, in that clinical trial, they killed people, right? Because they started vaccinating them with a live attenuated virus during the incubation time. Why I'm saying during the incubation time? Because the people that they selected, they did the ring vaccination. So automatically, if you select the people who have direct or indirect contact with an index case, with a diagnosed case of Ebola, the likelihood that some of these people are in the incubation time is very high. So now you know that you die from Ebola because of the huge inflammatory cascades that develop. So it's a highly inflammatory disease that leads to death. And when you're incubating a such disease, and then you come with a live attenuated replication competent virus that basically causes a lot of inflammation, well, then of course you shorten the incubation time to basically 1 or 2 or 3 days after the vaccination. But they didn't enroll people that were vaccinated, that were just vaccinated. They only enrolled people that, as of day 10 or 12 after the vaccination, because they were considering that the natural incubation time was 10 or 12 days. And so they didn't consider people who got vaccinated less than 10 or 12 days for the assessment of their endpoints. And so all these people that were selected, and through ring vaccination, through the choice of the ring around the index case, they died already before they even started to assess the clinical endpoint, protection against the disease. So of course, there they came up with 100% efficacy, because of course in the control group there were people who died of Ebola, but none in the vaccinated group. So
but
they
didn't bother to do an unvaccinated and versus vaccinated study.
No, they had a control group. So this control group, these were people who were, so to say, vaccinated later on, because it was, so to say, so deadly that they could not afford, knowing that people had potential contact, they could not afford, so to say, to not offer them a vaccination, but they delayed that vaccination. So the first, in the first time, this control group served really as a control, but they got the vaccination later on. So all these type of things, vaccinating with a live virus during the incubation time, or vaccinating, like they did with Corona during a pandemic, in the heat of an ongoing infection with vaccines that cannot sterilize. These are vaccines that can at most have a prophylactic effect, because you build antibody titers, and if these antibody titers are high before you get exposed to the virus, well, then of course, once you get exposed, provided the titers are still high enough, they can neutralize the virus and they will protect prophylactically. But not when you do this. During a pandemic, you cannot vaccinate everybody prophylactically, because people are already in contact, they're continuously exposed, especially knowing that in order to have that good antibody titer, you need to boost them. You need to vaccinate them twice. In the heat of the pandemic, that takes too much time. That takes 3 weeks. In the meantime, many people get exposed, etc. See, and you drive this immune escape. So that is what I'm saying, fundamental knowledge, but it almost comes down to common sense that is simply not present. And if people who know this in the lower layers, I would say, of these organizations, you have no way to convince management, because all the decisions are already taken in advance and the program is already defined, etc. So you find yourself like a stupid puppet in this theater, which was not my choice to continue. I mean, this was just ridiculous. Yeah.
It sounds like Ebola in 2015 broke your trust.
Absolutely. That is the reason that is the reason why I was probably, when the mass vaccination started, I was probably the first who reacted, who immediately addressed the WHO, said, guys, I mean, come on, this is not reasonable. I was alerted already before, so I was probably the first who, I would say, at the global level, reacted and told them immediately, I mean, come on, we must discuss, because this could lead really to a catastrophe. I was fully alerted, but at the same time, I was no longer naive, because I told all, family and friends, they all knew that I said, okay, we are going to do whatever we can to stop this stupidity, but we won't be able to fight that lobby. It's impossible. People, I've been working with this organization, I've been working with the vaccine industry, with all these corporates. I know how this works. I mean, people underestimate this lobby. They think because they win one or the other lawsuit for the tribunal, that there is going to be a change, that things will shift, and that now they will force them to be reasonable and to admit their mistakes and to change their policies, etc. Look what's going on with RF Kennedy in the state, and how the pharmaceutical lobby, is already pushing Trump to ignore part of his programs, etc. And it's yeah. I'm always saying, but this is a little bit philosophical, that the only power that can bring this to an end is nature. You can make your stupidity and mistakes escalate to a way such that nature will intervene. I mean, this has nothing to do with religion. This has just to do with the natural balance. It's all a balance. If you look at geopolitical systems, if we live in peace, it's not because there are no little wars at different parts, but it is all more or less in balance. There is a little bit war, and then it is, you have this straight horizontal line, and it's like a fluctuation around this horizontal line, right? It's also with like epidemics and pandemics. Yes, of course, every year you can have an epidemic, but as the epidemic starts to spread, then immediately the previous immune responses are recalled, right? And you get better protection. So the epidemic is brought on. Yeah, a few people will die, of course, but it's a very, very small percentage. So all this is like a reasonable balance. You know, nature is not a constant thing; it's fluctuating. But as long as its fluctuations are up and down, across a stable line, I would say it all works out very fine. Now, if you start to disturb this system tremendously, right? I mean, then it's a different story. You know, nature will come back in a violent way to get back to that straight line. Of course, we are not at that straight line in many regards with our geopolitics, with our infectious disease policies, etc. We are doing stupid things that. We think we can intervene in a way that we control these things. And we were just saying, Paul, how complex these things are. So it's already very difficult to understand, let alone that you would know how exactly to intervene in this at a global scale. At a global scale, we are not talking about just vaccinating a bunch of elderly people in one or the other population. We are not talking about a little war somewhere. We are talking now about wars that have global impact. Even if they are conducted in certain countries, they have global impact. So these are major perturbations. Pardon?
We see it at the petrol bowsers. I live in a bus. You have a van, right, that you drive over. Yeah, well, I live in a Toyota Coaster bus, and now the petrol is extraordinarily high. Can I ask, though, over here now, while we still we're being put in fear again, or they're trying to push the propaganda of fear with hantavirus or the rat virus, and now Ebola. And this was another reason to get you on. What are your thoughts on those two viruses and how dangerous they are to the world and Australia?
Well, hantavirus, I mean, it's already, this is another typical phenomenon that we see right now. The whole world is about sensation, right?
Yeah.
You hear about antivirus on a cruise, 2, 3 people died, a few more are infected, but this is kind of like very sensational. And then I told my friends and family, I said, in 2, 3 weeks, you don't hear from about this anymore. And now the discussions that are still ongoing, it's more about the logistics, how to test these people, how could you, do you need to take measures to let in these people in your country, etc. It's no longer, in fact, about the threat, about the disease itself. I mean, hantavirus is very, very clearly, it's not, in fact, directly transmissible. Of course, if somebody is infected, you have close contact. This is possible. But, again, same for Ebola. The people who are spreading this have symptoms, right? If people don't have symptoms, they are not spreading. So these things can be easily controlled with sanitation measures. And of course, as we were saying, the incubation time for Ebola is quite prolonged, can be up to 3 weeks. So that means that people can get infected, they can just look fine. They come from a region where there was an Ebola outbreak, but they are just looking fine, and everybody thinks it's fine. No, they can still 2, 3 weeks thereafter, they can still develop symptoms. But it's not before they will develop symptoms that they will start to spread the virus. So in fact, by isolating and by taking measures in people who are showing symptoms, you can easily control this. Now, easily, I'm saying in Africa, it's not easy because, they don't have, of course, the same sanitation standards as we have. There is a lot of logistic issues. There is a lot of beliefs, rituals, etc., that make things very complicated. When you bury people, the whole family still want to touch the corpse, etc. So all this is very, very complex. But basically, if you can isolate in one way or the other, or these people die and they are buried or even burned, who have symptoms, then you can stop disease. There is no asymptomatic transmission. But of course, these idiots are again starting to develop vaccines. I mean, vaccine against this Ebola now, during the outbreak, it's complete nonsense. During the outbreak, it's complete nonsense. Same for hantavirus. So what can happen, to your point, is that this develops, I would say, by lack of sanitation procedures and good hygiene standards it could develop into what we call a multi-country epidemic. So not a pandemic, not a global spread, but of course, the neighbor countries, people, of course, they move from one country to the other, etc. So you could have, like you had with MERS and SARS back a number of years ago, you had, and with Ebola, basically 10 years ago, the Ebola outbreak we were talking about, you had these 3 Western African countries that were touched by the epidemic. But I'm certainly not underestimating the losses and damage that this Ebola crisis, this new Ebola crisis now in Congo will cause, because it's a very deadly disease. And if you don't apply, or if you can't apply the sanitation measures and implement these hygiene standards, and of course, prevent people from having contact with dead family members, etc. This is all very difficult to do in Africa. It's very, very difficult. Then you can have, of course, a huge impact. And also people who had contact and are now in the incubation time, these people are basically free traveling through the country. So, but again, there is this gray zone. Is this going to become a pandemic? No way. Is this going to be Ebola? I'm not talking about Hanta, completely harmless? No way. It will do a lot of harm in those countries. Is there a need for vaccination? No way. And you see, they have developed these vaccines a number of years ago, and it's now another variant. The vaccine that they developed doesn't work against this one, right? Against this variant. So it's
business.
It's business, it's chaos, it's sensation. Now, all of a sudden, why 10 years ago nobody was talking about this Ebola crisis in West Africa? And it was also pretty, I know I worked with GAVI. It took like 6 months before this was more or less under control. At least 6 months, maybe 8 months. I don't recall this exactly. But it was only like West Africa, etc. Nobody cares. Now people are so, in fact, in fear. They're so in fear that whatever virus now arises, emerges, and causes one or more deaths somewhere, it's now all of a sudden the big news, and everybody's alerted. All countries are alerted. That in its own right has become a pandemic, right? This fear, this chaos, and this nonsense. You sometimes have the impression that the experts, the scientists, are no longer capable of having just some good scientific reasoning and just to apply some common sense. I don't get it. And I can only explain it because many of these institutions are living from this, because they are getting grants, they are making vaccines, they are doing the studies, etc. It's very sad. Even within the scientific community, I feel very, very isolated.
We have a great joke here. Jason Cornick wants to put Viagra in the water supply so everyone can get a boner.
Ebola.
Yeah.
What about hantavirus? What sort of pandemic potential that has? I understand Dr. Peter McCullough was saying they should have evacuated the ship. Isn't it the rats on board the ship that are probably a greater threat, and yet they were very worried about the people on board the ship?
Evacuated the ship? What exactly do you mean with evacuated the ship?
I think he was getting at, the concern was that there were perhaps rats carrying the virus on board the ship. The ship, the source of the virus was on board the ship, so the best thing would be to get people off the ship.
Yeah, well, it's very clear that unless things have completely changed, but they have, that rodents are basically the carriers of this virus. So there must have been some direct or indirect contact, and even if there are no rats on the ship, maybe these people who went on board were already also in the incubation time, or maybe there were still some fishes from rodents, but it's, you have like tons of food supplies that are brought on the ship, etc. I mean, you can easily have, I don't know. So this can happen, but yeah, I think you could have brought people on land. I mean,
if you did have infected rodents from the initiating port somewhere where it's endemic, then you could say, well, maybe if the source was the rodents on the ship, then you don't want people being exposed to the rat feces in a confined space of a ship. So I think maybe that's the
well, I think also there is some politics involved as well. If you blame this on an blame, it's not in fact to blame, it's probably the reality, on an unknown source like rodents or some fishes that you didn't find or that you didn't identify, then it puts into question fundamentally the well, not it puts into question, it means that going on a cruise ship is a threat. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. If now you can blame this just on these people who went on board and were already incubating
I see.
Hanta, then it's easy, because then you can say next time you come on a cruise ship, we are going to do a test, and if you test positive, you're not going to come with us, right? So you cannot
So they're
imagine.
protecting the industry.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
it would protect this is a huge industry, a huge industry.
I get it.
If you
And they
say,
already had the
you come on board, but we know external sources of contamination. It's inevitable, because look at the logistics, how complex and how many materials are brought on board, and raw materials and food, etc. Then somebody says, well, yeah, I'm going on a cruise ship, but it could be a hazard, it could be a health hazard, it could
stay
be
away
dangerous.
from rats.
Yeah, of course. Stay away from
So,
everything, because everything could be contaminated with the fishes of rats or rodents. If you say no, it's not a problem. You just test the people. If everybody's negative, it's not going to be a problem. It's much easier. But and this is just because it happened on this damn cruise ship. Because like every day, from what I heard, hundreds, if not thousands, of people are dying from hantavirus infection. Right, but that is not on a cruise ship, for God's sake. So,
that's interesting.
yeah.
With two
And there was a
questions.
COVID actor. There was an actor who pretended who acted during COVID, and happened to also be on the same ship, and was broadcasting from. There's something very suspicious about what's going on.
So I must admit that I have not dedicated a lot of attention to this Hanta thing on the cruise ship, because I immediately knew that this would be like an isolated event that would be very rapidly under control, where there would be no consequences. Except for a number of logistical consequences, because this is very, very rapidly then considered being a major thing, where many precautions need to be taken. But the infection as such, was very, very rapidly under control, which is typically for hantavirus. Again, sanitation measures, you have to avoid that you have these external sources that could potentially contaminate. And then again, of course, can hantavirus be transmitted from one human to another? Well, it's not easy. The transmission is not easy. But again, there is a gray zone. If you have somebody who is incubating or even showing symptoms, and you get a huge you're exposed to a huge viral load, then even a virus that is not easily transmissible from one human to another could could in fact become infectious for that particular human who is in contact. It all depends. Again, it's not black and white. The likelihood of this direct transmission is very low, but for example, there was this. It was a male who died, and then his wife died a few days thereafter. Right? I mean, this is a clear example. These people obviously have close contact, right? I mean, this is not your case as a passenger, for example. So, no worries about Hanta.
The other thing, we have a few questions from the audience. People want to ask long COVID. Now, some people say long COVID is a vaccine injury. Some say long COVID is real. Have you known a virus to leave people with something like long COVID before, or long anything? Because people say they're still suffering now, 4 years after contracting it. Is this?
Yeah. Well,
I'm
glad you're asking this question, because in this way we can continue our reasoning about the complexity and the gray zones. So I give you the example. If somebody says long COVID is caused by the virus, that people is right. If somebody says long COVID is caused by the vaccine, that individual is right as well. So then, how can you then merge these two different viewpoints? It's very easy. In highly vaccinated populations, and that is now almost like the majority of the world, you have continuously vaccine breakthrough infections. Because as I was saying, the infection and the spread is not under control. So clearly, because the spread and the virus is not under control, every single time you get this vaccine breakthrough infection, the immune system will do whatever it can. It will struggle. It will do the best job it can, but it will not be able to control the virus. So what you then get is this chronic stimulation of basically the full arsenal of immune effectors, like antibodies, like T cells, like all kinds of cytokines. And we know viruses that typically, corona doesn't cause typically chronic infections, but some viruses do this, like, for example, herpes viruses, etc. We know that these chronic infections can lead to a continuous, persistent immune stimulation without getting the virus under control. Now, these chronic immune stimulations, like T cells that are chronically stimulated, they can finally lead to chronic immune inflammation, to a chronic inflammatory reaction, and they can even lead to autoimmunity. Because these T cells are strongly stimulated. I mean, it would take us too far to explain this in detail, but let me summarize it in this way, that when you have a very strong and abnormal stimulation of T cells, some of these T cells could even start to recognize cells and tissues from your own body. So that is then autoimmunity. So the one who says the virus is causing it, of course, if tomorrow you could prevent every single virus breakthrough infection, because you would prevent the virus from spreading, I mean, you would not have neither deterioration of long COVID nor new cases. And the one who says it's due to the vaccination is right as well, unless you point me to documented long COVID cases in African countries that have not been vaccinated, that have a vaccination rate of maybe 1 or 2%. You don't hear these countries report about long COVID. So both are, so to say, right. And it's again, if I want to be polarizing, I'm saying, of course, it's the vaccine. It's only the vaccine. Or I'm saying, of course, it's the virus, depending on which.
Gray.
It's the combination of both. Yeah, of course.
And gray is where we live, to be honest.
Yeah.
Gray is where we live,
Yeah, and that is the reason, and people can write this down. That is the reason that as long as this transmission is not going to end, and as long as the virus continues to escape and to evolve, which is the case at lower pace, I agree, but it's still the case, as long as this is going to continue, we will see that long COVID will continue, to exist, and that cases will deteriorate, and that new cases will emerge. Right? This is when you have an immune system that does not work correctly, in a sense that it does not control the virus. You get what we are calling dysregulation of the immune system. The immune system is not optimally shaped to control the virus. So you start the immune system does whatever it can with tools that are not perfectly matching the virus. It does whatever it can to control it. So then you start to activate all kinds of immune cells and immune mediators that cause, in fact, harm. And as long as the virus is not under control, we know collectively the immune system of the population is not doing the job it should be doing, like we see after a natural pandemic, namely that it controls the virus. That means that it is continuously stimulating all types of immune cells without being able to control the virus. And because of all this dysregulation, you will get chronic disease like long COVID, like maybe also the cancers, like immune pathology, etc. And more people are now acknowledging that long COVID is to a large extent due to immune pathology that is caused by an immune system that is derailed, in fact. Yeah, that's no longer doing a job. It's complex because also people who are
That
not
was my next
vaccinated.
question, actually. Well, I
Yeah.
interviewed a chemist who refuses to be a pharmacist. He doesn't be a pharmacist anymore. He's never vaccinated anyone. He's a huge anti-vaxxer. But he said to me that he believes that our immune system now is far less effective than, say, my grandparents' immune system when they were young. Is that true? Do you know of that, or is our immune system still the same?
You mean genetically that there is a kind of
Yeah, he's just saying,
degradation?
two generations
No,
ago they had a
I don't think
stronger
so.
immune system than us.
No,
Yeah, the case.
but again, complex. Why
Yeah, yeah.
complex? Is it true that people in industrialized countries live now under very high hygienic standards? That as soon as a kid gets ill, it's treated with all kinds of medication, etc. It's no longer getting, in fact, the benefit of having gone through the disease, right? I mean, don't
I
forget
see what
that
you
I'm
mean.
always saying getting severely ill and dying from it, that is not acceptable. And that is very serious stuff. But we are now living in an era where getting ill, not being able to go to work, having to lay in bed for like a week, that is considered a disaster, that is considered abnormal, etc. And it's not. It's not. And and we would do whatever we can. I mean, the best example is in the US, where whatever you do, you have to wash your hands first, and all these ridiculous, sophisticated hygienic measures that are taken, putting tons of chlorine in water and all these type of things. Well, of course, it is leading to silencing our immune system, because the immune system says, if you do the job for me, I'm fine. I don't need to intervene. But it also means that in the meantime, the immune system doesn't get trained to recognize enemies, pathogens, and to fight against them, and doesn't develop immunological memory so that it can get back to that memory next time you get infected. So in that way, yes, we are ending up with an immune system in highly civilized or highly industrialized countries that is much less capable of fighting pathogens compared to our grandparents or our ancestors back I don't know 50 100 years ago,
Yeah, so
right?
say,
But not genetically.
because they used to have chickenpox parties, measles parties when I was young. I'm 60 now. So,
Yeah.
so that was the normal way to do this, to let people get it and work
Yeah.
the way through it and get a natural immunity. So that was actually a healthy way to go about it.
Yeah, well, but it's always the same problem nowadays. If you do this, just like the same, if you would manage a pandemic in in a reasonable way, which would be, of course, to avoid just to lower the infectious pressure, you would, of course, avoid like crowdings, tons of people coming together in the same room, etc. You would also avoid putting all disabled people or putting all senior people in this care homes, where you are basically concentrating lots and lots of vulnerable people. But so if you would take this care of measures to avoid this, and you would let the pandemic do its job, this is unacceptable for most people, because you know that you would have a number of people, a very low percentage, that would die. And that is nowadays, I, as a veterinary, with my veterinary education, you look at her, but you say, okay, this pandemic, will be completely finished within 3 months. All damage, it's all gone. It's the same question it's the same answer to the question that you are asking me. If you organize these measles parties, sooner or later, there will be one or the other kid, maybe after 200 parties, that will contract severe disease from measles, and that could potentially die. I mean, there is no doubt about this. I'm saying 200 parties, could be 2,000. I don't know. But sooner or later, you will have a kid that is immunologically vulnerable, that maybe has gone through this measles party while it was already incubating something else, or it was very, very tired or something like this, and it could develop in an unfortunate story. Because of that, this is no longer possible. This would be criminal. If you would now propose to reintroduce this, they could blame you and say you're a criminal. Like they're saying, a natural pandemic, uh, not doing anything, this would be criminal. What I was saying, that, of course, if you concentrate all the vulnerable people in the same nursing home, disabled people, all elderly people, you're going to generate tremendous infectious pressure. If you're going to organize big gatherings, pop festivals in the middle of a pandemic, goes against common sense, right? Then, of course, I mean, this is very, very bad policy. But if you don't do this and you try to reduce the infectious pressure, and you tell people, to live healthy, so that their immune system, their innate immune system, can have a as good as possible immune defense. Still, people will get ill, but they will not die, and they will come up with very strong immunity that, in the end, will keep the pandemic under control and will end it. But this is no longer acceptable to society. You cannot have one single death, so you intervene, and you put you don't let the immune system do the job. You do the job yourself, because you force the immune system to build antibodies. There's no stimulation of innate immunity. These antibodies, after a while, don't work anymore. We have seen it, and the whole thing gets dysregulated and becomes ineffective, and you start converting an acute epidemic and an acute disease in a chronic disease. COVID is now becoming a chronic disease. Is coronavirus intrinsically chronic? No, the chronicity is due to the immune system that cannot eliminate it, that got refocused, that is now developing all kinds of suboptimal immune reactions. As I was saying at the beginning of our talk, virus behavior largely dependent, largely shaped by the immune response, certainly at the population level, right? This is the same thing. Is coronavirus all of a sudden a virus that causes chronic disease? No, it doesn't. It's the immune system in many people that has been derailed, that is now no longer able to eliminate the virus, right? But that is the option that our global health authorities are choosing, because it's no longer, you can no longer defend that, somebody would die because you have not been, so to say, vaccinating them. But then retrospectively, you have to find out that many more people die. But it's all like diluted, because it's no longer within 3 months that a normal pandemic would last. It's now almost within 6 or 7 years, right? And it just because people keep the statistics of the excess deaths, where that include also people who die directly from the vaccination, but others who die because of the immune dysregulation that these vaccines have been caused and that are becoming chronic, right? So again, complexity, again, gray zone, and again, certain principles that this highly civilized, so to say, society is now developing and is now preaching that we cannot accept the idea of not doing anything, because this might cause even a single death, not taking into account that not doing it would be much more disastrous. If you don't vaccinate these children against, measles or chickenpox or whatever, and they have no contact with each other, then of course you lose herd immunity. You lose herd immunity because that is what, you get herd immunity after a pandemic or an epidemic. And then the question is, how can you conserve that herd immunity? Well, in regard of the childhood diseases, you organize these parties, so to say, okay, but after 200 parties, somebody will maybe die. Or you give these live attenuated vaccines. And of course, also, I'm the first to admit to say one or the other will have a bad consequence of this. But what is this compared to completely losing your herd immunity, right? So again, I'm not saying, you should vaccinate, you should not vaccinate. I'm just saying, let's have that discussion, a balanced discussion, a non-polarized discussion,
In
where we
this
come up
world.
with the pros and cons. Yeah.
Good luck. Can I ask, as a
That's the
vet,
problem. That's the problem.
as a vet, and
Yeah.
what is your thoughts on the Bovaer vaccination? Because in Australia now, they're injecting the cows to stop them farting, and we don't want to eat that meat. I believe in
I don't
Belgium
think
the
it's a
cows have been
vaccination.
really sick. What's that?
But
I don't think it's a vaccination. It's a food additive.
Oh, it's food additive, whatever, but it's to stop the cows farting. Do you know? I thought it was a
yeah.
vaccination. Sorry, that was. Oh, sorry, I was misled. I
Yeah.
thought they were
No.
vaccinating
Yeah.
cows.
Well, I mean, this is with that you give an example of there are stupidities due to polarized views. There you give kind of like the extreme example of the most unimaginable stupidity, right?
Yeah,
But if you go that way, if you start going that way of polarization, etc., there is no end to this, right? There is no
yeah,
end to this. And the thing is, the most frightening thing is that people get used to this, right? That is the thing. If you come up with all these things that start to become chronic, people get used to it, get adapted to this. I see this in our countries, for example. I'm just taking the example, the war, Ukraine and Russia. It's becoming chronic. Everybody knows it's still evolving. There is still some dynamic, but people get used to this. People get used to
yes,
this. It's. But we know that these stupidities or this chronicity, because it is evolving, there is a dynamic. And because it's not under control, there is none of the parties that has the other under control, because that would mean that you win a war or you lose the war. It's not under control. It's evolving. There is a dynamic. Inevitably, at some point, it will escalate, right? And that is what I think we are now seeing with many things, even with artificial intelligence. There is two parties. There is man, and there is artificial intelligence, and there is a kind of like competition, man tries to keep it under control. But we know man cannot keep it under control, and it is evolving. And which is the party, like viruses, which is the party that has the highest capability to be flexible and to be adapt? I don't think it's
AI.
man. I think
No.
it's exactly.
Well, it's already
So that
proving
is,
that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
at some point it escalates because it's not under control, and the one who has the better capacity for adaptation will win. And that's the same with the pandemic. And it's the same with the wars. If the one who is going to use, for example, nuclear weapons will obviously be the one who is most capable of adapting, right? And will be the winner. But so this chronicity, also in all these stupidities and polarization, is becoming very, very dangerous because people get used to this. Already now, artificial intelligence, people are saying or considering, well, that is becoming the new lifestyle, the new way of living professionally, but also privately. All these wars, this is becoming the new normal of geopolitical interactions, and it's a new way of geopolitical interactions. Also, the COVID, the infection that continues, the continued vaccine breakthrough infections, the spread, the evolution that's going on. It's the new normal. Yeah, you take a vaccine like you take flu because they are making people believe that's under control, that it's endemic, so to say, and that you can control it by taking a new vaccine every year. So, and people believe this, people adapt to this. And then all of a sudden it escalates inevitably, and people will be completely surprised, of course, right? Then it comes.
I really like that metaphor of the Ukraine-Russia war as a metaphor for the inescapable immuniscape pandemic.
Yeah,
and
because it's all, Paul, all the examples that I'm giving are developing at a global scale. So, and both parties are fighting with each other, and I would say because they can adapt to some extent, you can push this to a very, very high level, right? You can create a lot of tension. And so when that adaptation comes, that will overcome this tension, of course, the change, the transition is tremendous. It cannot be otherwise. It's at a global scale. Of course, if you have just a local war with no global impact whatsoever, that is different. But the examples I'm giving, like artificial intelligence, like these wars, like the pandemic, it's global, a global impact that is not under control, that is increasingly characterized by chronicity, evolving, mutual adaptation, and at some point it escalates. It's like this I would say a snow avalanche. You have a corniche of snow that is hanging above a mountain slope. And of course it's hanging there, and the snow adds more and more snowflakes are adding to this corniche. At some point, the material itself can absorb a lot of snow. A lot of snow can be absorbed. Like now, for example, the immune system can still absorb a lot of additional mutations. The effect of the additional mutations has become marginal, more or less. But at some point, the threshold is reached, and then this whole thing comes down. It is a major collapse, right?
You've used the word metastable, I think.
Exactly. That is what we call metastable. Very dangerous situation. So if people ask, sorry, go ahead.
When I was at university, I remember I had a brilliant chemistry teacher. I remember he brought out a clear jar full of a supersaturated solution, and it just looked completely clear, liquid. Put one tiny speck of the thing, and straight away the whole thing just changed the whole thing turned into crystal in a second. And I think that's the thing people have trouble and you know
Of course.
how states can change in complex systems very rapidly.
That is what we call phase transition, a real transition of the phase which generates a completely new landscape. And of course, it's difficult for people to believe this because as they look at this, you know, it seems to be more or less under control. And like now, the pandemic, come on, there is not that many acute cases anymore. Viral load has diminished. There is less transmission. You know, there is only a few deaths from acute disease. There is not that many hospitalization. So you know, people think it is stable. It generates the illusion of being stable. And you know, the material, it's also the same with material fatigue. It's something, you know, you probably know this material fatigue. You know, you can absorb more and more microfractures and more, but at a certain point, enough is enough, and the whole thing cracks down, right? And that is something, yeah. The chronicity makes that people think it's normal, therefore meta stable. It's not stable. It's like this small ball. If you play golf, I don't play golf, but you know, the golf ball that is just, you know, in a small, sitting in a very, very small hole on a steep slope, right? And then, as Paul was saying, one additional vibration or one, you know, weather influence, a little bit of wind, all of a sudden, that makes this ball roll like hell down to the hill, right? Very, very fast with huge velocity. And it seems a little bit philosophical, but basically it is not. It is really evolutionary biology, and it's even pure thermodynamics. And you see how you can translate this to other examples where you have complex systems of two parties, two entities competing at a global level with a huge capacity of adaptation. That means you can really go to a very high level of tension, a very high level of interaction, till the adaptation comes that all of a sudden can circumvent all the resistance that the other party has been building up so far. And then you have a major change at the global level, right? So it sounds a little bit pessimistic or negative, but I could not refrain from thinking myself, thinking about the pandemic. Is there other examples in our world where you see a similar phenomenon? And basically, if you start to think about this, there is many. Even I'm not that familiar with the banking system, etc. But even there, you have this kind of sudden crises that are unexpected, where there is chronicity, where people think, I don't know, it will still
like
go.
the world credit crisis then.
Yeah. There is several of these. Yeah, several earthquakes or something. Earthquakes.
Because they thought mortgages were safe as houses, and then AAA, and they went, and then Can I ask from another point of view? Because I'm not a doctor here. There's a lot of people in Australia, and I think the Western world, suffering from autoimmune diseases or their immune system is compromised. How hard is it to repair your immune system?
Well, that is of course a very legitimate but difficult question. Difficult for me because I don't have, based on my knowledge and expertise, I don't have a very positive answer to this, in a sense that, people don't realize the impact that our immune system has. And that is simply because people cannot really visualize this. If you tell people I had some heart surgery or I got a kidney transplant, they say, oh yeah, well, this organ, very important, of course, and they can see it in front of their eyes. If you, nobody tells you I got some surgery on my immune system, right? So the immune, Whereas we all know, Paul will confirm this. Everybody who has studied some kind of biology, medicine, whatever, knows that without an immune system, we would be dead on the spot. We would immediately die. It's continue. And the thing is, it is so sophisticated that it can even remember pathogens that we encountered during childhood. Even in our 60s, we can
Wow.
still, our immune system still remembers it. So the beautiful thing, in other words, is that your immune system can learn. It can recognize things, it can learn to recognize. And that recognition gets imprinted, in fact, in your immune system. That's what we call immunological memory. So that is something which is fantastic, fantastic. If you have been priming, that is what we call in priming, the imprinting of the immune system, so that it recognizes pathogens or harmful influences that it encountered in the past. But if that priming does not occur correctly, then you end up with an immunological memory that is not able to do a good job. It can do a suboptimal job, like we are now seeing in many people that are infected with COVID. Suboptimal in the sense that it has not the capability of really mobilizing the special forces that can specifically kill that pathogen. And because it doesn't have that capacity, it will mobilize all kinds of folks that are around that can play a role in the immune system. And this massive mobilization of immune players from the immune system will have some effect, but it will not be the right response. So once your immune system got dysregulated in a way that memory has been generated, and with all these vaccinations for sure, memory has been generated. The only thing you can do is that you can prevent that pathogen from attacking the host with this dysregulated immune system. That's why I'm saying, if you want to stop all this chronicity that is going on still with SARS-CoV-2, you would almost have to give antivirals to people so that the virus has no chance even to infect the cells. And you can, like Peter McCullough and others are promoting these detoxification protocols, etc., where you can obviously degrade the spike protein. And because you degrade it, you neutralize, so to say, the spike protein that is produced in your body, you can prevent the detrimental immune responses that develop when the immune system recognizes the spike protein. Right. So it's also either you neutralize the virus or you neutralize the spike protein by degrading it, if that works. But the programming of the immune system, as it has been done by these vaccines, for example, you cannot change this. You cannot change this. It's not like a drug that gets washed out of your blood after a few days, and then you start, so to say, from scratch again, because the drug is no longer present. It's no longer present in sufficient concentration, so it doesn't work. Immunization vaccines don't work like drugs. They teach your immune system a lesson that can be useful for the rest of your life, provided it has been the right lesson, right? It's like you start teaching a kid all kinds of, brainwashing on, criminal practices. The kid will remember this, for the rest of his life. It's in his memory. It's a little bit comparable. Yeah. So it's a dysregulated immune system. It is. I would not know. And I'm expressing myself in a euphemistic way. I would not know how you could possibly correct an imprinting, a priming of an immune system that has not been done in the right way. And, nature is, of course, fabulous, because these balances between the pathogen and the immune system has been established in a way that, like for corona, for flu, we can live with these viruses. And therefore, that's only possible because the response of the immune system has been correct. It is first, in fact, overwhelmed by the virus, which leaves the virus a chance, so to say, to survive. But then it kicks back in and it hits the virus in a way that the virus is eliminated. That's herd immunity. There's no transmission anymore till that immunity wanes, and from another source, you get again exposure to the virus. If that programming has not been done the right way, you have a problem. You have a problem. That is the unfortunate thing. That is also the reason why, from the very beginning of the pandemic, I warn people, try to avoid this, because this is going to misprogram your immune system, and people will say, well, all this, we are back to the same point, all this is bullshit, because look, I mean, the pandemic is now under control, people will say. Some people will say it's becoming endemic, it's becoming seasonal. Even some public health experts dare to say this. Whereas we know, no, it's still continuing, it's still spreading. There is still mutants that are generated and are co-circulating together. And there are still cases of disease, not that much acute, but now chronic. So this thing isn't over. And then we are back to the chronicity and the detrimental, I think, consequences that it will have at some point when a phase transition occurs. This is the attempt of nature to put things again in balance, right?
Yeah.
One cannot possibly imagine that nature will move on with a chronically disabled population, right? That is,
it's getting clearer. Am I frozen, or have I just?
You're
yeah.
black.
I can still hear you, Paul, but we can't see you anymore.
I might just pop out for 2 seconds and I'll be back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're saying, Geert, is that at any point, a variant of COVID might just break through the immune system, figure a way through, and then like Omicron, it'll go like nuts. And then suddenly, here we are. That's your main fear.
Yeah, right now we have a situation, and that's where Paul's comment of the non-linearity is very important. Right now we have a situation where the virus is, of course, still under huge immune pressure, because I just told you the immune system is now doing whatever it can to mobilize as many immunological resources as possible. So that puts the virus under pressure. And in the past, remember, the virus could just do like 1 or 2 mutations, and those mutations, those simple mutations, would all of a sudden give that particular variant a huge competitive advantage, so that within 1 week it would dominate all the other variants, and it would be the predominant circulating strain. We are not seeing that anymore. What we are seeing right now is that there are several different strains that are co-circulating. None of them is getting a sufficient competitive advantage, despite many mutations that are taking place. You have heard about this cicada variant. Well, this cicada variant has many mutations. Despite all these mutations, it is not really capable of getting a significant competitive advantage towards the other circulating strains. That's the reason why we are seeing several different strains that are now circulating together. Now, some people say, that's not a problem, because when this can simply continue. This can simply continue. The mutations, this progressive and incremental, the incremental gain that comes from these mutations will go on. But then I put something, and I will read it for you. I put something in one of my substacks. So the idea that a virus can indefinitely struggle against widespread immunity through marginal gains, that's what's happening right now. Huge, sophisticated mutations that only give a very, very small advantage. And the reason why all these strains are circulating together, also the reason why all of a sudden you will see that in a country, cicada is kind of like dominating, and then 1 or 2 weeks thereafter, it's declining, right? A very small influence can make a huge difference when your incremental gain is like very, very, very low. So so the idea that the virus can indefinitely struggle against widespread immunity through marginal gains is not biologically plausible. And then second sentence, evolution under constraint does not proceed through endless fine-tuning. So this endless fine-tuning would be, well, the virus will simply add mutations and will still gain a very small, every single time, a small competitive advantage. When incremental pathways lose efficiency, that is what's happening, because I was saying before, changes in spike protein had a major effect. Now, many changes in spike protein have barely any effect anymore. So when incremental pathways lose efficiencies, systems tend to reorganize, sometimes suddenly. This is not an exception to evolutionary rules. It is a consequence of evolutionary rules. So that is what evolution simply dictates. And that is also what we have been discussing when we have mentioned certain of these metaphors or other examples where chronicity at some point escalates and results into a major, a qualitative, very distinctive change, a major transition to a completely different landscape, right? Over.
Yeah, I think it's getting clearer and clearer, Gert. It doesn't mean that people will believe it, but this idea of an evolutionary bottleneck, I think, was you described well there, and we talked about nonlinear and complex phenomena, and again, I think the world is facing. My sense is we're facing polycrises at the moment. And this is still on my radar and has been for 5 years, ever since I saw you with Brett Weinstein and Robert Malone, and you talked about your concerns 5 years ago. It's probably you were already yelling it for 6 months, but that was when I first heard it. So it's still there, and yeah, I think it's good that people understand, how things can appear stable, but can change, and why they can change. And as always, I still hope you're wrong. but it's becoming clearer and clearer that an avalanche is building up. And like you said, you can't predict which snowflake is going to start the avalanche, but you know that as the snow is building up, the risk is that it will go at some stage. So.
Yeah, it's not possible. I mean, since I learned that these changes are not at all linear, it's also the first time I'm confronted with such a situation. Since I learned this, I stay completely away from predicting timelines. But what I keep saying is that when the virus or when a situation at a global level is evolving in a way that you're not controlling it and it becomes chronic, that it will escalate, and the change, the phase transition, will be qualitatively of a completely different order. It will be a major change in the landscape. That is something I am totally convinced of, and I'm not continuing to preach this because I tend to be, or I would like to be stubborn. It's because it is really what I learned, especially since I also looked into other systems, and it's especially, I think, what is very dangerous in a situation where it looks metastable. It gives the illusion to people that everything is calm, everything is more or less under control, sufficiently under control to not be too harmful, and that is an illusion. So that is why I'm probably still the only one who is really talking a lot about It's not fear mongering, not at all. It's not, well, fear mongering. I mean, of course, it's not a very pleasant perspective, but at some point, if you're no longer allowed to kind of like study these complex systems and how they evolve and compare this to other, systems that are also subject to these laws of thermodynamics, yeah, then I mean, then I would also be polarized and would join the crowd of health experts or scientists that are now saying, yeah, well, it has become endemic. We will have to live with this, just like we live with influenza, and we get our shot once a year, and we will be fine. And that is simply, I think, a lie. And that's why, if people are interested, because it's very exceptional that still people ask me for an interview. I mean, I was very surprised as well. Nobody's still
Really?
interested in interviewing me. I mean, it's not a problem for me, not at all.
We were shocked you said yes.
But it illustrates how people are done with the whole thing, which is exactly what is, the subtitle of my book, that, people in these highly vaccinated countries will be caught off guard, will be caught by surprise. Yeah, so it is what it is.
Well, good. There was a comment there that you're brilliant, and I always believe that your understanding of this complex system is wonderful, and I stretch at the very limits of my understanding to keep up with your writings over the years. Yes, but what I will say is that I think your recent articles, to my mind, are becoming clearer and clearer to explain it to those who are interested.
Yeah.
I was pushing the people. We talked about putting people in highly vaccinated regions on antiviral treatment. If we could synchronize it, we could stop the gain of function like activity that's going on. Unfortunately, I'm becoming less optimistic. I'm back to where we were last time, that I can't see it happening, although it would be the simplest thing and would be very low risk, and it could have enormous benefit. But yeah, I've lost a bit of optimism there too.
Yeah.
But your message has been consistent all along, and I just don't think people have patience to deal with. People are so bemuddled now that they don't know whether they're men or women, which bathroom to use. So when you're starting to talk about glycosylation patterns, forget it. But no, well done. I think although it's very complex, it's getting clearer and clearer for me personally. So I'm sure for others. And thank you for talking to us about the Ebola and Hunter and long COVID and all these things, which are still, they're topical. They're topical.
We actually were used to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for your interest, because I've decided already since a long time that I'm not going to annoy people anymore with these opinions. I write my Substacks because I know there are still a few people on the globe who are still interested in following this. But of course, if people are interested, I'm still willing to share those views, although I know they are not filled with a lot of positive news. But
and you have books and courses, don't you?
Well, I gave those online courses twice. I was surprised because there were scientists, medical doctors, and of course also laymen following the course. It was I think it was relatively successful in terms that I did not expect so many people to be interested in this, but I of course gave these online courses in a completely non-biased way. It was simply about the science and some of the hypotheses, but it was also because it's all connected. And if you understand very well what is going on in this pandemic, you understand a lot more about also pathogenesis and sense or non-sense of vaccination in certain situations, etc. But you come always down to the same thing. These things are complex, and it is so sad and so almost like criminal that these things are polarized, and that parties refuse to talk with each other. Even within the same camp, people would not talk to each other, or and that is of course not going to advance the science. Basically, I think whatever happens, it once again we will not have learned from the past, and that is
It makes you wonder how we
even
got
if
to here.
yeah, it's difficult also. You can say my theory is a nonsense, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. And I'm saying this because I read all the comments on my Substacks, etc. It becomes increasingly difficult to oppose some of the scientific principles behind my reasoning, right? And but nevertheless, discussion is still becoming impossible. And even when people discuss about the detrimental effects of the mass vaccination, etc., they would not even invite me. So recently we had a big conference with Del Big 3 and everybody invited in the Netherlands. Yeah, well, at the very last moment, because some followers, contacted the organizers. At the very last moment, they wanted to put me in a panel, but I was not asked to be one of the speakers or whatever. I mean,
So they
no
didn't have a
offense
seat
and
for a grey
no
thinker.
big deal, but it just illustrates how everybody wants to stay with his or her mantra, and that's
Dogmatic thinking don't
not
get us out of this.
a very efficient situation when it comes to analyzing such complex phenomena
Yeah.
virtually. Yeah.
Well, I actually find it really refreshing
Okay,
that you're great. I'm really sick of the black
Michael,
and
I
white.
can't. Can you still hear me? I can't hear Michael anymore.
Oh,
I can still hear Michael.
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah.
what's that?
Michael, say something.
Just is that better? Is that better?
No,
Okay.
I don't know what happened, but I hear
I was just going to
you,
say,
Paul,
I
but I
find
don't
it really
hear
refreshing that you're doing
Michael.
you're grey. I find it really refreshing that you're talking about this not in this black and white way. It's impossible to find common sense in a world where you either believe a man can get pregnant or he can't. There's and here with the viruses and everything like this, to hear there's a middle ground is really, really refreshing. Otherwise, I see Australia and the Western world almost becoming like Israel and Palestine. They're just fighting all the time, and there's no way to find an equilibrium. That's I find you refreshing. I struggle to keep up, but I'm still here. You didn't hear any of that.
Could you hear that, Geert?
No, I couldn't hear this. I can hear you perfectly, but
Michael was saying it was refreshing that you're not at extremes, and I was thinking that's just what science always was. I spent the last 5 years thinking it's not one extreme or the other. People always want a thing, so you have to you frame it in one extreme or the other. But the truth is always nuanced. It's always in between.
Exactly.
And
that is exactly.
It's a space I've been living for, for 5-6 years now too. But look, I think you can't hear Michael. Michael, should we wrap it up then?
Yep.
But it's been wonderful to catch up. And although and I don't want your logic to prove right, but if it does, of course, it's one of the most consequential things in human history.
Yeah.
And so the idea that people are not even willing to talk about it is mind-boggling. But thank you for your time and for going through all these, going through your knowledge and explaining it, and we'd love to see you again and get your input.
Can you hear me
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. It was very nice to talk to you. Very constructive. A lot of exchanges. I would just maybe want to ask Michael if there is a link to the video, if you could send it to me. I just post it on my website, not to impose it to people, but as I was saying, there's still a number of people, quite a lot actually, who are following me, and they find all the information on the website.
He said he would do it. I was thinking of Brother Skian at school, my maths teacher, Brother Lewis actually. He said it's like mud. You keep throwing it at the wall, eventually some of it sticks. So we'll keep throwing the mud at the wall.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you
okay, well, thank you so much, and take good care, and maybe we'll still have opportunities to talk in future, but this has been very, very nice.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I will keep that in my mind. Thank you.
I'll send you the link anyway.
Take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Thanks.
Wow.
So I can hear you, but Geert couldn't at the end. So I just
such is life. Such is life.
Such is life.
I kept up. I understood most of that. I kept up.
I like I said to Geert, I think is the message and the principles are becoming clear, and that's no mean feat given how difficult immunology is, and evolutionary immunology, which is what he talks about. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I've got to get ready for the quiz show now, so I'm doing questions. So the quiz show's going ahead, guys. We're expecting a troll attack. Hardly any trolls tonight, Kel. One troll tonight, so there we go. So, so we'll go from there. But it's fascinating, and there's a load of shorts I've got from here, stuff like this. It's really, really interesting, and I wonder if the reason he's been ostracized is because he won't play ball.
Well, I think no one likes the potential of bad news, But we are in a time of crises, and you don't know which ones are going to hit. But we all know that they can. And again, I still hope that that this never happens. But if it does, it will be very, very, very consequential. So
to roll up, from my point of view, what he's saying is that it looks like COVID's dying, but all over the world, COVID is still active, trying to find a breakthrough mutation. And once it finds it, then that could be an avalanche of a really dangerous variant. That's what
it's like you said with the Ukraine and Russia. It looks like it's in stalemate and it's stable and quiet, relatively quiet, but it's still going on. It's unresolved. And it could change phase. It could change phase. And he's been consistent with that.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We've got a new intro I'm going out with. This is it's a part of a new song called "Welcome to Country." I'll post the whole of it in a bit. Jan. There's been a few big interviews coming up. Thanks everyone for sharing the other interview about Richard, the doctor who quit being a doctor to become a doctor, and I'm glad that I did this. I was right. It's nothing to care about. So I don't even have a PhD. I just got
Time for some Ebola chips and some
I just
Hunter
got
hot sauce.
Yeah, I just got grok. Actually, what I might do before I do the intro, I'll just play you the quiz show opening. So if you haven't seen this is the quiz show opening tomorrow. There's been a young man who was killed in England. He was, if you haven't heard, he was walking home. He had some sort of altercation with a young Sikh. The young Sikh stabbed him with a ceremonial blade 5 times. When the police turned up, the young man was arrested because the Sikh had said that he'd been racist, and he told the police that he was being stabbed. The police refused to believe him. They said he hadn't been, and he died in handcuffs, drowned in his own blood. And it reminds us of the case in America where the white girl was killed on the train, Irina. And what it is like everyone's going, well, where's the Black Lives Matter? Where's the White Lives Matter? And there's so many rapes. There's so many things going on against white people. I'm calling the show, When Is It All Right to Be White? So it's going to be controversial. I expect the trolls to come out. They're probably going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. They're probably frothing, like you said, Paul. They're frothing at the knees to attack us.
Like a zombie horde.
Yeah, and the start of this is me learning Grok Imagine. Go to Grok Imagine before AI destroys us all. We can have a lot of fun. So this is Geert saying something positive for once. Not Geert. What's his name?
Dennis.
Klaus.
Oh,
Klaus. I got Klaus Schwab saying something interesting for once. I'll play it here. What's going on?
What shame will you take?
So I'll go from there, and then I'll play the other opening after that. So I'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. We'll only be on Michael Gray Griffith Interviews, Michael Griffith Facebook, and together those ones are over 110,000 or something now. So we're back to where we were before we lost Cafe Lockdown. I'll be on Cafe Lockdown X and Cafe Lockdown Rumble, and Kelly's going to play the door bitch, and I'm going to concentrate on this, and we'll see if we can have a nice, good conversation about something that really matters. So anyway, and thanks everyone for watching the Doctor Show last night. If you could share the doctors together, I really loved that show. It was long, it was beautiful, it was sad, it was everything. I really loved it. It's almost like a signpost in time. This is where we are, and it's not a good place. Anyway, take care, my brother, and I shall see you soon. And I'll play this ad and then the other one after it.
How much white shame will you take before you say enough?
It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. Oh fuck, is it only Monday night? It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. Oh fuck, is it only Monday night? It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. Oh fuck, is it only Monday night? It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. Oh fuck, is it only Monday night? His internet will lag and his prizes are crap, and I'm pretty sure he never took the fucking jab. But since you're all out of fuel because your government shafted you, where else can you go? So roll up, ladies and gentlemen, and come on down to Cafe Locked Out, because it's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. Oh fuck, is it only Monday night? Come on everybody, sing along! It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. It's the quiz show on the globe. Oh fuck, is it really only Monday night? are on fire tonight, sharing their defiant larrikin souls. A larrikin song our kids may never sing. In the silent world we're building for them, a quiet world full of debt and shame that we are leaving to them. A silent world where the larrikins were the choirs of yesterday. Why are we putting up with all of this? Don't we want all of our kids to know that they are all Australians, and that this land is their home? Why are we putting up with all of this? Don't we want all of our kids to know that they are all Australians, and that this land is their home?